today getting a chance to look at a couple of gyroplanes. We've got a tandem two-seater right behind us, and to my right here we've got a side-by-side two-seater. We're going to have a look at each one of them. Greg Greminger is the man behind the Magni Gyro in the United States. This is an Italian design, is it not, Greg?
Yes, it comes from Italy and sold in America as a kit. I'm the American representative for it.
And you've been doing this for several years now.
Oh, 12 or so years, yes.
Yeah, in fact, one of my few rides in a gyroplane was with Greg, and I don't know if it was in this particular one or not, but
no,
one like
this
it.
is brand new. You wouldn't have flown in an Angry Bird, would you?
I didn't even catch the significance there, but anybody who plays games on their mobile devices certainly knows what that all references about. Anyway, today, in today's market, you're not allowed to sell a fully built aircraft because that's what FAA says at present. They can't seem to quite determine how they want to do that. So what is the present status for somebody that wants to buy one of these? It's intrigued and says, okay, well, what do I have to do?
Well, the best way to certify a gyroplane, and probably the only way, is experimental amateur built. That's the 51% rules.
Okay.
You can still buy them fully built if you're willing to operate under the experimental exhibition rules.
Ah, okay.
And there's some restrictions on there.
You got to tell them where you're going to go and stuff like that. Then.
Actually, some FSDOs will tell you that's the way to go, guy. Do that. Other FSDOs who might not be as liberal with that, and you happen to be there, and their FSDO could shut you down. So we're worried about that. Most people worry about exhibition, so we go with the 51% amateur build.
Yeah, unless you're really not a hands-on guy, I would think that the 51%, now you can do kind of what you want, whereas the FSDO's Flight Standard District Office, it's a local FAA offices all around the country, and they really get to control a lot of what happens in their area. So they're kind of the key guys in some of this stuff.
And some of these rules are up for interpretation, so you can be interpreted one place one way, one place another way, and you could get in trouble in the other place.
So a friendly FSDO is a good thing, and well, correct. Anyway, we don't need to go the other way.
Now the amateur built,
do you have to do stuff like build?
Everything.
How much do you have to build?
Almost everything is assembled. The major things such as engine, rotor head, wheels, gearboxes and all, they're all pre-assembled. The FAA does agree. They've come out with a new checklist for gyroplanes about 2 years after they had a new checklist for airplanes. The new checklist for gyroplanes, they've agreed that there's not much on here that we want anybody to build for safety reasons, or to fabricate at least. So it turns into mostly assembly, if not all assembly. For instance, we, under the old checklist, we used to have to wire the instrument panel, which it takes a little expertise, and that's a little bit of a safety item. Now that's not even on the checklist, so it's a freebie. So mostly they're a bolt together, which makes them a quick build kit. Can be
so
very
what kind of
quick
hours
build.
are we talking about? Let's say for the Angry Bird here.
Well, traditionally the old rules, it was taking a brand new builder about 300 hours. Myself, I've built a few of them in about 150 hours.
Really?
Once you know what you're doing. And I've had customers that have built more than one because they're fun to build.
Well, I'm telling you, 150 hours in the world of all the airplanes we've looked at over the years, 150, that's for an experienced builder, I understand. That's a very low number, actually. Even
it is a very low number, and you can build them pretty quick. One of our competitors, and I won't mention the name, but they are bringing over kits that are very quick build, and I understand they're building them. The customers are building them in a week.
Wow. Okay. So the whole matter. So that let's give a little credit back to FAA here. We were a little mean to them early on because they can't seem to make up their mind about the fully built SLSA category that it ought to be able to meet.
Right.
But at least they have said, okay, look, there's this checklist Greg refers to as a multi-page thing where they say, how much of this part of the airplane or that part of the airplane does the builder actually have to do himself, and that got to total up to 51% at the end. Right. Hence the informal name of the rule, at 51% rule. It's really called experimental amateur built, but a lot of folks refer to it that way because that's what makes sense. So that doesn't sound too bad if they gave you a revised list that makes it easier. The tough parts where you could have problems and cause safety issues, the factory can do, or you can do, or somebody else can do for them, and then they just, like an erector set, put it together. Huh?
Right. Obviously in a gyroplane there's no spars and ribs to build on your own and fabricate on your own, so where an airplane 51% has some fabrication that you have to do. And of course all those are for recreation and education.
Yes.
So we've always argued for the all experimentals, what kind of education is there in sanding the bubbles out of a fiberglass body, you know. So
sounds more like tedium to me. But,
actually, now painting isn't even something you can get credit for or have to give anybody credit for. So those are
that right? Okay, that's another kind of an art form.
Some reasons that it can be very simple. Now, to be clear, even though the FAA doesn't allow SLSA gyroplanes, these are still LSA qualified, which means you can fly them as a sport pilot yes, with an endorsement for sport pilot gyroplane.
So they come to you, they get some training, they learn how to fly, they can use their sport pilot certificate and operate this aircraft.
That's right, and that makes it very easy for a fixed wing pilot or any other pilot with a certificate, helicopter, trike, whatever, to get an endorsement for a gyroplane, because it's one instructor. They come to me to get some training to pass the proficiency test. Okay. They go to another instructor, which we happen to have down the road, to take a proficiency check ride, and you are now legal to fly LSA under a sport pilot endorsement.
Well, you know what let's do, Greg? Let's go, both of us sit in your side-by-side two-place that's here, the M24 Orion, and talk a little bit about what it actually takes to fly one of these guys. Okay. Because I'm one of those fixed-wing guys, too. And this business of a regular helicopter in both hands, and I've heard it likened to standing on a beach ball, which is on another beach ball. That sounds kind of tough for a lot of us.
Yeah,
I understand these are way easier.
Much more stable even than an airplane, way easier. Basically, you have your hand near the stick or maybe resting on the stick to keep it going in the right direction. Well, and even the worst of turbulence.
Let's go sit inside and have a look and see how that actually works. Here at the Midwest LSA Expo, we've had another aircraft arrive that we hadn't seen before. And we've not seen too many of them in this country yet, I understand, but this is the M24 Orion from Magni Gyro, the same company that made the Angry Birds one here we looked at a moment ago. And Greg, this is a new model to my reference, but it's been around a little while, you said.
It's been around the world for about 4 years, mostly in Europe. There was a large demand for an enclosed model for the northern European countries.
Makes some sense.
And Magni had actually been trying to enclose a tandem gyroplane for about 7 years. There are aerodynamic reasons that when you enclose a tandem, the enclosure becomes a very efficient wing with a more efficient coefficient of lift, and then it takes a much bigger tail to stabilize it.
Sure, you got kind of a vertical fin up front in a sense.
That's right. Huh? So for two actual prototype models of tandems with full enclosures on them, they decided that was not up to their standards for flight stability.
So they turned to the side-by-side as a way to solve that problem.
The reason the side-by-side solves that problem a bit is because then the new efficient wing up front is further back, closer to the center of gravity, and has less of a moment arm to work on.
Yeah, this is definitely a much shorter aircraft than the
than if you fully enclose it along.
And when you fully enclose that, yeah, it'd be even longer, I see. So does this one fly a little differently than these are known to be very sporty, highly maneuverable. You watch somebody fly a gyro, you can just tell they're having fun.
Well, gyros come in a lot of versions. First of all, you see the little single-seat old-style gyrocopters, and they're very light and very maneuverable. Also often very unstable, which makes them really dance around in the air a lot in the hands of a good pilot. Not so safe in the hands of a not so experienced pilot.
Okay, so a little bigger aircraft, actually a little easier to handle?
That's right, because of the weight and the moments of inertia, and also the secret to a stable gyroplane is the same secret airplanes have.
And
big tail, way back.
Okay.
Big tail, way back.
Because these are not helicopters. They're not using a boom with a rear rotor that creates the stability. You're doing the main stability through a tailplane just like an aircraft does.
That's right. And you'll notice that a lot of the old gyrocopter models don't have big tails. They might not even have a tail or a horizontal tail, and they certainly aren't all way back. The way back is the important part.
Okay, just like on an airplane then.
Yes, it gives a dynamic damping, and it flies then just like an airplane. These aircraft fly just like an airplane. By that I mean you judge your speed by the nose attitude to the horizon in your banking, and when you bank or change the nose attitude, change the control to the rotor, the nose responds exactly to that response. An unstable aircraft, and especially unstable gyroplanes, you may make a control to the right, and the nose goes to the left for a few seconds, and then it goes to the right.
The old
That's why they become
problem,
Well, it's not even adverse yaw. It's
in
just
an airplane, I mean.
Yeah, in an airplane it is, but in a gyroplane it's actually a sign of instability, which the pilot has to overcome by his control. Yes, okay. In other words, if the nose goes one way, that's not necessarily telling you the truth. Right. You're really going that way. But when you put a big tail way back, the airframe follows the direction that the rotor takes it, where that big wing up there takes it, and it does it very quickly and gives the pilot a good feedback to control the aircraft, and you don't end up over-controlling.
When you're doing this all, you're using your hands much like I see a conventional fixed wing. Of course, we can't use our feet particularly easy.
Actually, you don't need, when you make a turn in a gyroplane, especially with a big tail way back, you don't need to use the rudders. Our feet are flat on the floor, even in a
So it's all done by hand then, huh?
All with your cyclic stick, just your one hand. The other hand is there available for the throttle, but you can set the throttle and leave it.
Now, a fixed wing pilot knows that when you're pushing and doing this, he knows what parts of the airplane are moving and has been taught about how that works. In a gyro, it's different. Everything goes up here to the rotor head, and that's where the action happens, right?
The difference is that in the gyroplanes, rotorcraft, helicopters, gyroplanes, when you move the cyclic, you're moving the wing. That big.
The cyclic is the joystick.
The joystick.
To my mind. Okay.
The joystick is moving that wing, and then the airframe follows that. Now it follows it very accurately and very quickly, so it's actually fixed to the rotor.
So you're sort of flying the rotor, and then your kind of baggage that goes along with that.
That's right. Now I'd like to say, you know, where you have a fixed wing airplane, you have a fixed airframe gyroplane. If you have a big tail, the airframe fixes to the rotor rather than the rotor fixed to the airframe. So that allows you, with your cyclic joystick, to move that wing wherever you want to, so it gives you much more authority on it. And the airframe will follow that exactly, so the pilot doesn't over-control or
And this is why the rudder usage is just not so in demand. But yet I look back here, Greg, and I see that
you have a big rudder.
In this place, well, and the rudder is in this particular situation probably because of the way the controls are secured, but it's well off to the side, so obviously it does move.
Oh yes, the rudder is used for is necessary for crosswind landings, just like an airplane.
Okay.
Cross control for crosswind landings.
Same kind of control usage?
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. You might have more control in it, at least in the tandems that I'm familiar with. I can land in a 30-mile-an-hour direct crosswind. I have enough rudder control in it, but the aircraft becomes slow enough that it can handle that crosswind.
Okay.
Now, if you ever have to land in a 30-mile-an-hour crosswind, don't do it. Just land into the wind across the runway.
Yeah, because you're going to take up no space at all.
The landing speed of these things is around 25 miles an hour. So if you got a 30-mile-an-hour crosswind, you might as well make it easy.
Even in these larger aircraft that we're talking about, the speed is that slow?
Yeah. Now, the reason you don't have to use the rudders for rolling is because there's no wing or aileron, and so therefore no adverse roll. So you can make a roll, and it will follow that roll very exactly. You don't, if you have a ball, and we don't even have a ball in them. Some people put a string on them, but if you have a big tail way back, you just use the stick to cyclic stick to control your roll at pitch.
So in a sense, that tail back there. So you said that this side-by-side Orion here flies a little differently than the other one. Give me just the basics.
It's just a little bigger, a little heavier, and it has more wind restriction in the front, and the nose will be a little more sensitive to turbulence. So it flies, I would say it flies more like a sedan. It takes a little more effort to fly it than a sportier tandem that doesn't have as much
That's kind
drag.
of a sports car. This is a family car.
That would be a family car, and this would be more of a sports car.
Okay, well, it's a little more airplane than the open seat tandem. What's the build time on this? Since you have to build it as a kit, just like the tandem, what's the build time on this one, Greg?
I would say it's around 400 to 500 hours.
Okay, so that's a pretty good measure more. Is that because of the extra material?
It's because of the whole enclosure. It has a firewall, and you have a cowling around the engine.
Okay, looking over your shoulder at the other one, I see some of that difference. And what engine is the owner of this aircraft using?
The 914 engine is the only engine that is sold with this aircraft.
Okay,
100
Orion
horsepower.
always uses that.
Orion always uses that. It's the 100 horsepower turbo Rotax.
Right, which gives you 115 for a while kind of thing.
Yeah, you can use that for takeoff.
Okay.
And we do use that for takeoff on this because it needs the performance.
Because you're pushing a little more through the air to begin with.
Right.
And the takeoff here is, again, you're using forward thrust from an engine, not a rotor powering you up.
That's right.
Correct? Okay,
that's right.
Good. All right, good. Well, let's go have a look at the tandem aircraft a little
Angry
bit.
Bird?
The Angry Bird, and we'll finish up our video here. So when somebody comes out to do training with you now, Greg, you're going to do it in this aircraft. This is what you call the M16 trainer?
This is the trainer. It has dual controls front and back.
I see. Okay, and when you're doing instruction, I presume you're in the back, are you?
I'm in the back seat after the first hour.
Okay, first hour you're up here. Kind of like we do in a weight shift trike then.
Yes, right.
Okay. And once the guy's got some familiarity or the gal's got some familiarity with how this works, then you can put them up front and you operate from the back.
Right, one exception, if you're already a pilot of any kind, I'll just put you in the front seat and we'll go fly.
I see, okay, all right. So that would be for someone with no knowledge whatsoever, and I guess it begs the question then, you can take a complete novice and teach them how to fly a gyro.
Oh yes, even a complete novice, if I put them in the back seat, I'll take off, and within 3 minutes of turning off in the airport, they've got control of the aircraft and they do all the flying the rest of the way until we get into landing practice.
Okay, okay. So what seems like kind of a handful of an airplane to fly to some of us that are fixed wing oriented or even weight shift oriented, not really that big a challenge at all.
No, it's easy to fly. I consider it easier to fly than an airplane because it's not nearly as sensitive to the wind, and you really don't have to worry about adverse yaw and using the rudders right and keeping the ball centered and all that stuff.
All right, so if you had a thought that these were too tough, get rid of that thought. Get a hold of a guy like Greg and see if it's for you. Greg, you've given us a lot of information. Thanks so much for this education about gyros and how they fly and so forth. Where do we come and get even more information from you on the website?
Well, www.magnigyro.com.
Magnigyro.com. Excellent. Well, I had a flight with Greg once. I got to come and get some more time so I can report more about it. You can find that, other kinds of videos, and all kinds of things about all the LSA on the market at BuyDanJohnson.com.